we discussed in our first podcast, conflict sensitivity is defined in 3 ways. Number 1, it requires us to understand the conflict context in which we're working. Number 2, it asks us to use that analysis to think about our interventions and the ways in which they may do harm or do good. The third step is using that analysis is to plan accordingly with adjustment strategies in case we inadvertently have unintended negative consequences of our interventions. In our second podcast, we focused on conflict analysis and the role that it plays in a conflict-sensitive approach. Specifically, we discussed that PERL uses 3 conflict analysis models. One is looking at the stakeholder mapping, which helps us identify key actors, their positions and interests. One is the conflict tree, which helps us understand the drivers of conflict and/or the cause and effect of different conflict systems. And the last one is looking at the stages of conflict, which helps us understand if a conflict is escalating or de-escalating. Using those 3 analytical models, PERL embeds those tools into its overall political economy analysis. In this way, the political economy analysis tool for delivery teams becomes comprehensive, and it allows delivery teams to also pull out or deduce conflict dynamics in the midst of their discussions around political economy. Our third and final podcast will focus on the last 2 steps of the conflict-sensitive approach, specifically looking at the 2-way interaction and how to design adjustment strategies. For PERL, using the analysis that was conducted, embedded into its political economy analysis, we're able to use that to understand what we call the 2-way interaction. If you think about it in a practical way, what this is asking you to do is think about your context, Kano State, Borno State, Yobe, Jigawa, etc., as a cup of hot water. So imagine in my hand, it's a cup of hot water that represents the context with which you are working. If we think about our intervention, whether it be addressing service delivery, water, sanitation improvement, budget reform, financial and public service management reforms, we would then say those are pieces of lemon. Now, what this component of conflict sensitivity is asking you is to understand what happens when these 2 things come together. What if we put a piece of lemon into a cup of hot water? There's a reaction, there's an interaction. This is what the second step of conflict sensitivity requires us to do. Your conflict analysis becomes the ways in which you understand that cup of hot water. What's happening inside there? Who are the actors? What are the dynamics that are happening inside there that are causing or creating or mitigating conflict? Our activity becomes all the interventions that PERL is working on. We have an extremely elaborate work plan which involves a number of activities that build up towards progress markers. All of these are guiding PERL towards its overall theory of change, which is improving governance reform and service delivery. Therefore, the conflict-sensitive model allows the PERL team to sit together on a monthly basis and review a series of interactions between their activities and the context. If the context is telling us that there is a potential that our activity could do harm to the beneficiaries living in this context, PERL has the obligation and the opportunity to design a series of adjustment strategies. These adjustment strategies are then triggered in order to make sure that these interventions do no harm. In the case of PERL, we have been working for the last 3.5 years on a series of interaction indicators and adjustment strategies. For example, as the conflict dynamic changes in each of the states, such as Borno or Yobe or even Adamawa, the analysis is able to tell us what sort of intervention would we be able to do to reach our overall theory of change of governance reform and improvement to service delivery, but in the most conflict-sensitive way. Perhaps it means working with ASCON, the Administrative Staff College of Nigeria, to work on how local government officials are trained in the most conflict-sensitive way. Perhaps it's an intervention that tells us that actually the MTSS for the water sector, or the midterm sector strategy document for the water sector in Borno, is the best intervention place for us to have the most effective and sustainable change. Conflict analysis is able to guide the PERL program to make these sorts of analytical adjustments and make sure that in this way the program is doing no harm. So we invite you to stay tuned to our YouTube channel to see podcasts on budget, public finance management, and public service management reform. Thank you very much for staying tuned, and if you have any questions, please let us know.